social media derby. Obviously, we're in for a great episode today based off of what happened this weekend with Man United winning the FA Cup. But we've also got a great episode ahead with our end of season awards. So we're going to be going through all of the best and worst players and teams and managers from across the season so far. But before we do that, obviously, as always, for those of you watching on YouTube, please subscribe to the channel, like the video and share it if you can. Also, feel free to comment down below based off of anything that we say in the show. And for those of you listening on Spotify, Apple, or any other podcasting platform, please follow us and give us a 5-star review if you can. As always, it helps with the algorithm and getting us in front of more people. Let's now move on to the end of season awards. So let's preface this obviously for the crowd. So we're doing a number of different achievements, or I guess awards. So we've got some individual ones for players and managers. So we've got MVP, or essentially best player of the season, most valuable player of the season. We've got rookie of the year. And there's a clarification here that we're going to say doesn't have to be their first, games in the season or in the Premier League. It could be players that have, played a few games here and there for other teams or for their own team, but really have had their standout season this year. We've got most improved player of the year, which is self-explanatory, signing of the season, flop of the season, manager of the season. And then we've got some team awards of biggest overachiever, biggest underachiever, performance of the season, and we're talking team performance of the season there, not player performance. And then lastly, we've got game of the season. So with all of those awards, we are not only including the Premier League. All right. So we're talking about any competitions that were played by a Premier League team this season. It could be FA Cup, could be League Cup, could even be technically Champions League, as well as Premier League. So we'll kick it off with obviously the most important award. That is the MVP. I don't know if we're going to have too much disagreement here, but Ant, who have you got as your most valuable player of the season?
So I was very tempted to go for Ollie Watkins, but
interesting.
I've decided to go with the popular opinion, despite his all-time stinker in the FA Cup final. I'm going to go for Phil Foden. I think this was his City year. City won the league because of Phil Foden this year. And to do that in a team full of De Bruyne and Haaland and all Bernardo, all these Rodri, all these players that are basically top 5 in their position in the world, is one mean feat. And he scored unbelievable goals. He's developed that screamer. I think we talked about it on the pod last week. Developed a screamer now that he maybe didn't have before, and he scored really important goals. So I think that's probably a bit of a tap-in one, and I guess you've gone for the same thing, right?
I have, and I've done it for similar-ish reasons, but I just think when I think about the MVP award, I'm thinking about who's made the biggest difference to their team and whose team has done the best as a result of that. And I think, obviously there are other players to talk about. You've got Cole Palmer, you've got Odegaard, you've got Rice, you've got Alexis McAllister, even if you really want to shove him in there. You've got Ollie Watkins. You've got players that have really made a massive difference to their team. But at the end of the day, when you look at the teams across the league, Man City are the ones that have come away with it, right? They've come away with the biggest trophy of any English team this season. And I would argue that Phil Foden is the major reason why. And I know that a lot of people put Rodri with his unbeaten streak in there as the major reason why. But really, if you look at it, Man City lacked something in their attack. Without Kevin De Bruyne around the whole season, they really were lacking something, right? The Dokus of the world, the Haalands, they all need somebody to link things up for them. They need somebody to put the team on their back. And I think Phil Foden did his absolute best Kevin De Bruyne impression over this season. And I think had De Bruyne done a similar type of performance across the season, we'd probably be arguing that he was the best player of the season. So from my point of view, Phil Foden, as much as I said Saka was better than you and all that stuff, and we'll get into it another time, I'm sure, next season, but you really went against everything and just really played out your skin. And as you said, developed his game. Everyone argues he's technically really, really good already, but I never saw him being a person to slap screamers in. I didn't see that being part of his game. And he really has managed to develop parts of his game that I think he didn't even have to really to still be a really good player. So I think there's no arguments there. I think Foden really does deserve that. But let's move on to Rookie of the Year, Ant. So obviously we did the whole Rookie Team of the Season last year. There were a lot of different players, different names in there. This player, on my side at least, was not in there. But who have you got for Rookie of the Year?
I think we're going to say the same person on this, and this will be quick as well. I'm going for Cole Palmer. He technically couldn't get in our Rookie Team of the Season last week because we did it on players who'd never played in the Prem, never touched touch of grass for any minutes, which he obviously had for City here and there the season before. But now I just think it's undeniable, man. The amount of goals he scored. I know you're gonna, penalty army. You're gonna start coming out and start telling me how many pens he scored, but it doesn't matter to me. Like those penalties, I think, should score points for him because of some of the pressure point penalties that he's taken. I'm thinking that one against United to equalise, the one against City in the dying minutes and peeing it down with rain. The amount of penalties he's taken, high pressure penalties, he deserves massive credit. And I think also just because in a sea of absolute waste that Chelsea were in terms of their signings in the last couple of summers, he is an absolute diamond. And, I'm praying with every little bit of me that he's going to turn around at some point in the next couple of years and say he wants to go back home and he wants to, play for his childhood club, because I don't want to see him play for Chelsea. Like the way he plays, the kind of personality is a bit weird, but also kind of almost like, a couple of the youngsters that we've got currently in the team, he's kind of seems to be pressure proof and he seems to not feel like the tension and stuff like that. He's just a really, really good player. And I'll be really interested to see how he does next season, because I think he will find it harder. People will know a bit more about him. It's a second season curse. But, he's been a pleasant surprise for me this season, where I feel like there's been a lot of things have been quite predictable about this season, I think. He's been super unpredictable. And, unbelievable player. And, big up Cole Palmer. Basically the only good thing about Chelsea this season. So he's got to be the Rookie of the Year. You've got to say the same, surely.
No, I've got him in there, but again, my reasons are going to be slightly different, because for Man City, when he did play last season, he did look class. Like, I will say this, right? There was a couple of times where he came on late sub type of thing and really looked like he added something to their team. And technically he looks really good. Obviously, to have like a lefty as well, always they look technically a lot cleaner. But the main plaudit I've got to give him, and the reason why I've given him Rookie of the Year, is because to go from Man City, where you're not getting a lot of game time, where it's a pretty big decision to make, right? Because you're guaranteed success if you stay there, right? If you can stay in there like Foden, like whoever it is, and just be patient, you're going to be guaranteed to win 6 Premier Leagues by the time you're whatever age, right? To make that move, and to make that move to a team of all teams that has made so many different signings at the same time, right? That has essentially a new manager, new ownership, new everything, right? A very, very unstable environment. To make that move requires a lot of confidence, right? A lot of confidence in yourself, first of all, but a lot of confidence generally that things are going to work out. And then on top of that, to actually then go and say, you know what, I'm going to put the team on my back, and I'm not going to be dragged into the mess that everybody else is in, right? Because you've got to think of all those signings, surely not all of them are terrible. Some of them have got to be decent players. And the issue is, when you're surrounded by rubbish, you end up becoming a bit rubbish, right? And it's very difficult to say, you know what, no, I'm not going to be like the rest of you. I'm going to be better. I'm going to do things differently. Even if I'm being badly managed, whatever it is, I'm going to go and do things differently. And I think that's why I want to give him this award, because, man, it's so easy to fall into the sea of rubbish and just be like, you know what, I'm going to hide behind everyone else and we can just blame it as a team thing. He said, you know what, nah, it doesn't matter. We're not going to win the league. We're not going to get anywhere near it, but I don't care. I've got some personal pride in my performances and in the team. I'm going to do my absolute best to get these goals. And the fact that he was, he's saying to players that want to nick penalties off of him, nah, you stay right there. This is mine. I know I'm not going to mess this up. Nicholas Jackson, you very well could. So, all of that accountability that he had in a team that apparently has no accountability really is really impressive for a player that age. And as you said, maybe you just have to be a bit weird to be like that, right? Because it's that stone cold part of him is probably the part of him that makes him so good. And it's
Yeah.
probably also the reason why he's a bit weird. So,
Yeah,
and he's not that weird. I'm just saying, like, he doesn't seem very personable in terms of in front of a camera. He doesn't seem like the kind
just
of
a
guy
bit
that wants
awkward,
to
isn't it?
be, yeah, he doesn't want to be in the limelight, it looks like, right? So, all of that combined, Cole Palmer, mate, you've got to take that award. And I mean, a couple more seasons like that, and you might be in the MVP conversation, let alone the Rookie of the Year, mate. So,
Definitely.
for my
I think he
sake, I
was
hope you
in the.
don't keep it up. But good work to you.
I think, to be honest, bro, I think he was in the MVP conversation this season too.
I agree.
But I just think the same kind of logic that we used for the United Arsenal season comparison thing. Chelsea have stunk it up. I know they've snuck 6 in the end, but they're in the Conference League. Hold that, you bunch of weasels. But you can't compare that to City, can you? Like, then that's what's probably taken him down a notch. But yeah, big up Cole Palmer, big baller.
All right. Well, let's get on to. I mean, he could even be in the next category as well. But let's get on to most improved of the season. So we might have different views on this one, right? Because this just means I'm assuming you're taking it to mean your performances last season or traditionally versus your performances this season. How good have they been? There's a lot of players that have improved or been very different to their seasons last season. So why don't we start with you? Who have you got as most improved player of the season?
All right, so there probably are players who've improved more, but I feel like he's got to get a shout out. And I feel like he's been the best defender in the league this season. And that man is Gabriel, no Jesus, just Gabriel from Arsenal. Because I feel like, and it's not me trying to be a hipster or be alternative or be, countercultural or whatever. Saliba gets so much credit and all the plaudits all the time. And I get it why. Because on the eye, he looks smoother, he's younger, he's probably slightly better looking. I don't know. There's loads of things about him that make him maybe more kind of more attractive to call out as a player. But I honestly believe Gabriel has been your best defender, been the league's best defender, and he was very good last season as well, by the way. So I actually don't think it's necessarily like a huge jump season on season, and you might have someone else for that reason. But I've gone for him because I feel like the improvement from where he was a few years ago, doing bozo things, to now being, like I said, the best defender in the league. I think the best defender in your team, and I think potentially, at least an equal 50-50 partnership with Saliba if they go forward as a duo. What a defender, man. And I just think the turnaround has been unbelievable. And also there's a part of me that just wants to shout him out as well, because he, like I said, he just doesn't get a lot of credit. And when people mention him, it's kind of like in passing. And I feel like he needs to get more plaudits. I think he's just been a really, really top defender. And, if he keeps this up for a few more seasons, I think he's in the world-class category of defender. And I think, it will be undeniable. So I think, I've gone Gabriel.
Well, it's very interesting. I didn't consider him just because I was looking mainly at last season. And same thing for Ben White. For our whole defence, while I think they deserve plaudits, and if we ever do like a team of the season type of award, you know that I'm going to put them in there, right? Just like last week, right? I'm going to put them in there, and they deserve it. But I've really just gone for who was not so great last season, who was much better this season. And I've gone for Dom Solanke. So
fair enough. That's a good.
Obviously,
show.
Dom Solanke was decent-ish last season, but I think Bournemouth have really outperformed where they should be, right? Like if you look at their team, it's not that good, man. And I think he's a main reason why they were able to be where they ended up at the end of the season. And I think the improvement off of last season to this season has been immense. And you know that I don't call him out too often, right? Whenever we talk about this, we talk about Ollie Watkins, we talk about Solanke, we talk about Isak, etc. All these different, Premier League strikers, and I always put him really at the bottom. To be honest with you, I put Ollie Watkins, I put Isak, I put Haaland, all these players far above him. But I can't ignore the massive improvement. When I was looking at the numbers, man, to go from where he went last season to this season is a major improvement. And another thing on top of that is that it's rare that you see that jump at this age, right? Like, he's not a spring chicken. He's not the youngest of players. I think he's 26, 27. You don't always see that happen, right? If they're, I'm going to pull up, there's been some other strikers around that kind of area where they just never really developed into much. There's a certain lead striker that I'm thinking of. And I guess for him, he's made that jump, and I've got to give plaudits to him because it's not easy. So it's a wonder kid comeback, maybe, failed wonder kid comeback for Dom Solanke. So I've given it to him. But let's get on to signing of the season. A lot of different people to choose from here. Who have you gone for?
I've gone for Basmati Rice. Yeah, and it's gonna almost seem strange, or like, the viewers or listeners will probably think, who's actually the Arsenal fan, because I'm keep giving all your players credit. But I heard some people talk, and they've done similar things to this on other content creators have done their end of season awards, and a lot of people have kind of discounted Declan Rice because of his fee, and maybe looked at other people because they were cheaper, and then want to give them more credit. But I actually look at it as, you coming in for 105 million, your Arsenal's largest ever transfer, broken the record, smashed it, double, triple, whatever, way more than the closest one, right? I think Pepe was probably the closest one before that.
Yeah.
But you've broken the 100 million mark. Everyone's putting a lot of kind of pressure on you as being the one who, has to try and be the game changer for the club, along with Havertz, to take you over the edge. And with that comes a hell of a lot of pressure. And we've called out and had arguments and combos about, big money signings, whether they're a flop or, what the kind of criteria is for them to be a success. I think you can already say Declan Rice is a success now. Like, and your whole chant thing, we owe West Ham an extra 20 million or whatever. Like, imagine how many other big money signings can you say have had the impact and have had basically the transfer fee kind of been rubbed out so quickly in years gone by. I don't think the signing's ever done that. And I think he's just, top player. And now you've seen he can also do the 8 as well, which I think has thrown up a really interesting conundrum for you guys this summer. Whether you go and look to get a 6 to replace Partey, or whether you go get an 8 and then put Declan Rice in the 6. Because I think he's just been so versatile as well. So got to give credit to him, man. He's been absolutely this season. I would say you could say his performance has been world class, and if he keeps it up, he's on that trajectory, man. So big him up. Declan Rice, I think, is my one. What about you?
Yeah, I've gone for the same. For very similar reasons. I think, just because you have a big fee doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be a good player. Cough, cough, Caicedo. And Endo. You know what I mean? So I think for that reason, and not only for that, but also coming into a team that was already quite good and making them even better, I think that's exactly what you want out of a signing like this, right? And I think it's always been the issue of Arsenal to not be gritty enough, right? To not be to have that dog in midfield really in a smart way, right? Because obviously Xhaka was a dog, but he just did it in the wrong way sometimes, right? I think Rice coming into that role and just really providing that stability, but also that aggression in the centre of the midfield is something that we've majorly lacked. And I think it would have been very easy for him to just not blend into the background, but, not to be as accountable as he was this season. And I think with all of that in mind, based off of the fact that he's also, probably in line to be our captain at some point in the future as well, right? He shows leadership on the pitch and off the pitch as well. All of that combined, I think you've got to say that he really was the best signing of this season, because I think if you also look at it, we got years left of him, man. It's not like he's, a world-class centre mid coming in from, let's say, a Real or so on, where he's older and, he's only going to give you a couple of seasons. Rice, that he's going to be here for a while. So I think not just signing the season, but could be signing of the next few seasons, really, depending on what he does for us. So going to give it to Rice. Couple honourable mentions, though. I think Kudus is definitely in the conversation for an honourable mention, really, in that category. I think he's been very, very good for West Ham. I think there's a couple of other names to say, but I think really those two were the top of my brain when I was doing this. But let's get on to flop of the season. So this is the exact opposite. I'm going to go first here, and I'll be really quick. We can talk about as many players as you want, but if you get banned for betting and your team ends up doing real stinky as a result, and you end up playing like 4 or 5 games, and you actually look relatively promising in those games, and then you end up being not available for the rest of it, you got to hold it. Big transfer fee, Italy's finest, one of their like new up and coming players, Sandro Tonali. You might not be next season, and I hope you get better, mate, but you've got to go down as flop of the season, in my books at least. What have you got, Ant?
No, I was really tempted to go for Tonali. Because have a word with yourself, mate. I know there's the whole thing about the addiction, and from that angle, I get it. Hope you get your help, and you fight your demons, and you get back to the pitch. But also, have a word with yourself, because you've kind of screwed. It now looks like he's done Milan a favour, isn't it? And he's kind of got them the 60 mil or whatever it is, helped them out and screwed Newcastle over. Because with all of that looming, wow, that just feels like absolute negligence on Newcastle's part, and also on his part as well, to not disclose it. So yeah, I was very tempted by him. I've had a couple of other honourable mentions knocking about. You mentioned a couple of them. Enzo, absolutely stinky. 115 million, so even more than Rice as well, and he's been absolutely abysmal, or 110 or whatever it was. And Chelsea have actually looked better since he's not been there, which I think is even more of an indictment of how bad he's been. Caicedo, I actually think he's been decent, but for 100,
it's getting
I think
better.
he was actually 150 million for that price. I just think it was just a terrible deal in the first place. Because if we look at all these other midfielders that we're talking about for these big prices, right? Pogba's gone for similar. Enzo, obviously. Rice, we just talked about. Caicedo is a defensive midfielder. He's not like any of the others. So it's going to be so hard for him to pay back that money or even look good. For he would basically have to imitate what Rice has done. Show a lot more going forward, though, right? And do other things. And he just hasn't. He's been underwhelming. But I've actually gone for a Liverpool player here, and I've gone for Dominic Szoboszlai. And I think the reason why, SpongeBob, the reason why I've gone for him is just because of the absolute unnecessary hype that was created after he slapped in 1 or 2 long ranges early in the season. Comparisons to Gerrard, all of this stuff. I'm sorry, he's absolutely been abysmal for the rest of the season. I think he was even dropped for like the last 5 or 6 games. And yeah, he's been really, really poor. And I just think the hype created around him after those first few games, I think he was a bit more than Tonali.
He was.
Yeah. And he was kind of the jewel in the crown of their midfield rebuild. And I could argue McAllister's been 10 times the player he's been. Endo's been way more critical as well. And he's kind of just been absolute waster of this season. So I'm going to go for Szoboszlai. But I hear what you're saying. Tonali's up there. The Chelsea midfield lot are up there. There's a lot of shouts, sadly, for flop. But I think Szoboszlai, for all the Gerrard shouts, I think, some Liverpool fans deserve some slaps after, slap themselves after they said that. Because it's, he's been abysmal. So Szoboszlai.
All right. Well, let's. I can't fully disagree with that one. I think, he has been abysmal, and I think Liverpool fans obviously went way too big on him. So count yourselves responsible, Liverpool fans. But let's go on to manager of the season. I mean, I'll be honest with you, man. I don't know about you, but this was slim pickings at the top half of the table. And really, there was only one person that stood out in my mind. So I'll go first. I've gone for Unai. Good evening. As much as I'm an Arsenal fan, and I probably shouldn't like him for some reason. I don't know. He beat us twice, right? He beat us twice as well. Knocked us out of winning the bloody Prem. But he's done an unbelievable job with them. They're squad-wise, I know obviously he's got a really good director of football as well. But squad-wise, they look really good. They're well coached. They seem to play really, really like cohesive football. They play well together, and he's managing to get a lot out of players that I didn't think he'd be able to get stuff out of. Right, like John McGinn. I'm sorry, mate. I relegated you to being horrible, and you actually look pretty decent. Leon Bailey. Obviously, I don't really like him, but he seems to be getting a lot out of him as well. Ollie Watkins turned into one of the best Premier League strikers. There's a lot that he's managed to get out of that team, and obviously coming fourth, getting them into the Champions League, that's a massive achievement, right? And I know that Aston Villa fans say that they're a really big club and all of this, that, and the other, but that's a massive achievement to get that team in this day and age with all the money that's being thrown around to get them back into Champions League is major. So I've got to give him the plaudits. Who have you got, Ant?
No, I completely agree. It was slim pickings because there was just one standout performer, and it was completely Unai. Unbelievable season. He's had an unbelievable period as Aston Villa manager, point blank period. Like including that little bit when he came and took over after to Stevie G was about to take him down. He's been unbelievable, and I love to see it because I feel like maybe not Arsenal fans, but you guys were harsh to him. I think he was decent with you guys. Maybe it's not a right fit, and you guys are doing well now with Arteta, but I feel like there should never be any animosity towards him because I feel like he's just a really nice bloke, and he's handled everything that's come with that disappointment, and even PSG, which we've talked about before, as being a basket case club, and he's managed them, and was very respectful. So yeah, I love a bit of Unai, man. Big him up. Really good manager as well. But I think honourable shout out is Bournemouth's manager. Iriola has done unbelievable because they started terribly. I think they were looking like relegation fodder. They had lost the first 8 or 9 games or something. But since then, he's done really, really well. And like you said, they've got kind of a blend of journeyman / unknown British players with a bunch of wonder kids from FM, and they've done really well. And it's actually looked like a cohesive team. They play good football. So I would give him an honourable mention. But yeah, Unai, I think, is the clear winner on manager of the season.
Agreed. And I think if he'd come in earlier, we might be saying something about old Glasner in that conversation because he's got Crystal Palace looking like a well-oiled machine right now. So, but yeah, Unai, good evening, good night. You've done a great job, mate. But let's get on to the team awards now. This might be in line with the last one, but Ant, who have you got as the overachiever of the season? Who do you think has done far better than they should have, given where they started at the beginning of the season and the hype around them?
So I was very tempted to go with the obvious one, Villa getting top 4, because I mean, you said it. Villa are historically a big club, but they haven't been in terms of achievements for decades. So for them to go above United, Chelsea, Tottenham, Newcastle, obviously after last season, have been punching above their weight as well. I think Villa is probably the obvious one, but I've gone for Bournemouth. It's the prop. I couldn't give to Iriola. I'm giving to the team right now. They did really well, and I think where they finished in mid-table is a great result for them. They're a small club. I know they spend quite a lot of money, but it was a big risk to sack Gary O'Neill. Remember, we went so big on them, saying they were so stupid and all blah 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 blah. They finished above Gary O'Neill, Gary O'Neill's Wolves, and had such a tough start. So I'm going to say Bournemouth. I think they got to mid-table when they were probably destined to be knocking around in relegation. So I've got to give it to them. Yeah. What about you? You're going to go for Villa?
So I had them on the shortlist. But I did end up going with Villa just for the aforementioned reasons, right? I think they've massively overperformed. I think there's an element of a lot of other big teams possibly underperforming, and maybe that made it slightly easier for them because, I mean, them and Tottenham were doing their absolute best not to get into the Champions League by the end of that season. But yeah, I've got to go for Villa. I will say a little shout out to Everton because I'm going to be honest with you, that team is horrible. That team, man for man, is shocking, and they've been points deducted back and forth, getting points back and then getting them taken off them again. That's mad. And the fact that they've managed to somehow stay up and not look all that bad at the end of the season, like you've got to give some plaudits to them. And it sounds really weird for a team that came like bloody 16th or whatever to give them overachiever, but based off of that team, they deserve. If there was a fourth spot, I'd be saying get them down as well because they man for man stink. But on that note,
such an Everton hater.
on that note, let's get into the underachievers. I think we've got a lot of candidates for this one, funnily enough. Who have you got for underachieving team of the season, mate?
All right, so I'm going to need context. I'm going to have to give context, right? Because
sure,
it goes back to what you said earlier. We're not just talking about the Premier League. If we're talking about just the Premier League in isolation, I think it's a no-brainer. It's got to be us. It's got to be United. Finishing 8th after finishing 3rd, we dropped loads. We're points accumulation compared to last season was way less, but we're not. We're including cup competitions, Champions League, Europe, all kinds of things. And I think with that additional context, I can't pick United, and I'm gonna have to go for Newcastle. So the reason why. And I'll show my working out here, right? I'll do it like one of our tests back in school days. We finished level on points. I know they had a much better goal difference, but, when you're in 7th and 8th, it doesn't really make a difference, right? But we're finished level on points.
Better than minus as well, by the way.
Exactly. We had -1. Shocking. We finished level on points, yeah? They beat us in the Carabao Cup, but they still went out and didn't win it and do anything major in that competition. They had a terribly hard FA Cup run, but they went out and couldn't, lift the trophy. And they also finished bottom of their Champions League group. So if you take it, we had really similar seasons. The one outlying difference being we managed to win a trophy. And like you said earlier, we did it a relatively difficult way too. So it's not like we had Newport County the whole way around. No offense to Newport, right? But we did have, a couple of lower league teams. But dotted in there, we also had to play Liverpool. We also had to play City in the final. And we managed to win the trophy. So I think that's what has kind of made it difficult for me. And I didn't really need too much excuse to try not to pick United here. But I think that's what separates us and Newcastle. So, yeah, I'm going to go Newcastle. But, to be honest, we did say, and I think it was probably more me, because I'm a bit of a Newcastle hater, was saying that they would finish lower than Villa and a bunch of other teams when we did our predictions, right, at the beginning of the season. So it's not a shock to me, but it's all the things combined that I think, yeah, wow, they've not had a great season. And they were chanting about being in Europe and all that kind of at Brentford when they won. So they can hold that as well. No Europe for you, mate. Brexit for you guys. What about you?
So I've gone just around the hype that was built up around the team prior to the season starting. And the fact that they've ended the season in, I'm going to say, pretty bad shape. And I'm going to go for Brighton.
Oh, yeah.
There was a lot of gas about them, obviously being a really good team and playing really well. And De Zerbi was this and De Zerbi was that. And everyone was talking about Brighton as if they were going to be a fixture of like that top 6, top 5 kind of thing. And that they were just going to keep on going. Now, I do take into account that they've lost a lot of players. But the fact is that they got the money from those players, right? It's not as if they got stolen, like players stolen off them for low fees or anything else like that. They got a lot of money for those players and
sold.
Yeah, like in terms of the players that they sold, they had a lot of money left over from those things. I know it was relatively late in the season and stuff like that, but they had a decent chance and they still had a pretty good team left over afterwards. And apparently one of the most exciting managers in the Premier League. And the fact that they've now ended the season without that manager, and depending on who they get in next, it could be an iffy time for Brighton, right? I know that they're really well kind of managed or run, but depending on who they go for next, it could be a different Brighton that we see next season and so on. So I've gone for them, but I definitely think there's a shout for Newcastle. I think there's a shout for Man United, of course, but another big shout for Nottingham Forest. Because I'm sorry, Nottingham Forest, you've got a pretty good team, man for man. And I know that you got points taken off you and so on, but that's your own fault. You shouldn't be that low. Honestly, you shouldn't be that low, right? Got teams like Fulham that are doing really well with probably a worse team than you. So from that point of view, I think Nottingham Forest deserve to hold a bit of smoke. And I'm sure that will come back to bite me in the ass next season as well. So we'll see how that goes. But yeah, I've gone for Brighton. but let's see how things go. Let's get on to performance of the season next. So this, I'm assuming you took this as just one singular game.
Yep.
Across any of the competitions, right? So what have you gone for as performance of the season? I think I know the answer.
No. I think I think you've misread this. So I went in purely in terms of like the quality of the performance. I've not gone for like, you know, the emotion or anything else that comes involved. I've actually probably gone more for that kind of direction for the next and final category or of the awards. But for this one, it was hard for me because I've said it to you off camera, and I feel like I've said it on camera as well. Arsenal for me have played the best football this season, in the Premier League of English teams. So it's one of the performances where you absolutely slapped a team silly, which you did quite a few times in this second half of the season. I'm thinking Sheffield United 6-0. That was disgusting, really. It was done in like 25 minutes, pretty much. And you absolutely pummeled them. But you have to factor in that Sheffield United are absolute shit. So, you know, it's not a lot of, you know, resistance that was put up. The West Ham 6-0, that was pretty impressive as well. Generally, you'd say West Ham are a good team, but they kind of just fell over and, you know, Vaseline themselves up for you. So that was I can't really say them. But I will say the one I've gone for is Arsenal at home to Chelsea, 5-0. I think you absolutely destroyed them. And I think for the first half, Chelsea put up a bit of a fight. But once you got that second goal, Havertz, I just think it was so impressive the way you absolutely dispatched them. Because if you look at Chelsea's back end of season form, they've been decent. And they were kind of upward trending, and you just absolutely slapped them back down. And there was so much pressure around that as well. You obviously had the Spurs game coming up and the United game coming up, and you're chasing Man City. And again, this is going to make me look like an Arsenal fan, but, you know, I was genuinely supporting you guys at the back end of the season, and I feel like that game was a potential banana skin, and you absolutely battered them. So, and I think you played really, really well in that game. So I've gone for Arsenal 5-0 Chelsea. What have you gone for?
I went for the game on Saturday because of the fact that Arsenal slapping Chelsea is, in my mind, what we should be doing. And of course, we played really well, but the competition was like, I know Chelsea were good at the back end of the season, but like it's still Chelsea after all, and they have had not a great season, and their team is not like outstandingly good. We obviously did bop them off the park, so that kind of accounts for it. But at the same time, I've got to say, like, I gave Man United absolutely zero chance of winning that game yesterday. And from the point when I'm saying performance of the season, I'm saying like the biggest shock result that really, in my mind, before the game was never happening. I've got to say that Man United beating City with all of the stuff that was around it, right? Like the tenor gas and all that stuff going on before it. The fact that Man City were, you know, just won 4 in a row. They should be coming off of a high, all of this kind of stuff. The fact that you've done that on the biggest occasion that you could like theoretically have in English football is mental. And I think you've got to get plaudits for that, right? Because I would feel differently if I felt like you stole the match, right? Like if you stole a result, if you just kind of smash and grabbed one, I wouldn't give it to you. But the fact that you actually deserved to win it in the end is so different to what I would have expected to happen in that match, right? They really are man for man, clearly a better team than you. Off of the last 5-10 years, they've been a better team than you. It's the final of a competition. You'd expect them to just do what they've got to do, even if they don't smash you. But the fact that you did that to them, it's great, right? From a anti-Man City supporters perspective, hold that City, hold that Rodri. You know, the Man United soap opera continues. So I'm going to give it to you, mate. But I will give a shout out to Villa beating City. I'm going to give a shout out to Arsenal beating City as well. Pretty much anybody that beat City was a candidate for this award in my mind, right? Wolves beating City, anyone.
Oh, that's a good one. Wolves beating City was good. Wolves beating City is a good shout. The other ones, I feel like you're running agendas, and I love it. I'm here for that agenda. But the Wolves one, yeah, that's impressive because Gary O'Neill deserves some mention within all these awards because I love me some Gary O'Neill. Unbelievable performance. They kind of dropped off back in the season, but yeah, that one, beating City was wow. Big them up. I know Hwang Hee-chan kind of gave someone an elbow somewhere in there, But the fact also,
He deserved it.
the fact also that he was the Korean guy before that, and he managed to slap Pep down. Beautiful. Yeah, I think good shout. I like that mention as well. That's a good shout.
All right, well, let's get into the last award, game of the season. So I'm assuming you're taking this as like the most exciting game to watch, the best as like an advertisement of football, right?
Yeah, just the best game to watch in the season. Let's start with you. Who are you going to go with? Let's see. Interested to see how you've interpreted this one.
Well, again, we may as well just swap teams at this point because I've given it to you beating Liverpool, and that was
yes, I've gone for that as well.
It was absolute comedy, and the fact that you had just Bruno quarterbacking and just hoofing long balls up, and you were the beginning of the end for them, which was the best thing for me. Really. Liverpool fans, get back in your box, lads. To have Man United be the team that do it to you as well. Oh, so sweet. So yeah, I've given it to you. That win in the FA Cup, mental.
Yeah,
no, I went on to win it as well.
Yeah,
mental.
I've gone for that game as well. I've gone 4-3 Man United. I think the Chelsea-Man City game was pretty entertaining as well in the league, the 4-4. When Cole Palmer scored the last-minute equaliser. That was a pretty interesting one. But the fact
Arsenal
that
against Porto, by the way, stick that in there. Porto, that second leg when we won on pens. I know it wasn't.
Yeah, for you guys
the most
winning,
entertaining football, but yeah.
I think a moment in your season that might have been your, a thing where you got over a hump. But I would probably say that the one where you beat City at home is more pivotal for that kind of same purpose. But I think the Chelsea 4-4 was good, but it just didn't really have that much on it for where the teams kind of finished in the end. So I have to go for United winning 4-3 against Liverpool. We had no hope. They were talking all about the quad and all that rubbish. It felt like they were going to, just come into our back garden and just slap us up. And the way it went as well, it was such a roller coaster game because, we were behind, then we were ahead, then we're behind again. Then, missing open chances. Rashford, do you remember that last one where I think he was kind of offside anyway, but he put it wide in the last minute of normal time. We could have won it then. Then, Harvey Elliott, S-Houses one in. It was just such a game. And then, just for the way it ended too, with Ahmad scoring the winner, a player that a lot of United fans really want to see more of and has just looked so classy when he's actually played. And for that to be such a pivotal thing, like you said, for us actually winning the trophy, it's got to be that 4-3 Man United Liverpool in the FA Cup. And like you said, even sweeter that we kind of derailed their whole season with that. And then we played them in the league and we didn't quite win it, but we also, again, derailed their Premier League title charge. So for that to be the end for Klopp, finishing third and winning a Carabao Cup, equaling Ten Hag's first season, beautiful. I just think unbelievable way for that to end. And it was just, entertainment value was there. So I've gone, the same thing. United 4, Liverpool 3 for me.
Yeah, I agree with that one. And I'm also going to put in some of the Man City Real Madrid matches as well, because that was beautiful. They were entertaining to watch, that 3-3, that first leg as well, that second leg too. Both entertaining matches to watch. And the fact that City lost them made them sweeter.